Welcome to Batya on NewsNation. I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon, and we begin with what we learned about America this week. Both the House and the Senate voted to release the files of sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, who had a long history of cavorting with the rich and powerful before he died in prison awaiting trial. Their names are expected to be in those files. Epstein's crimes are horrifying, preying on scores of girls as young as 14. Any powerful individuals who participated in those crimes or continued to associate with him after his true nature was revealed deserve to be exposed. But the obsession with Jeffrey Epstein, who met the end that he deserved, is so obviously political. Just as Republicans once hoped to tie Democrats to Epstein, now the Democrats are trying, without any evidence, to hang Epstein's crimes around Donald Trump's neck. Worse, it's an elite obsession that's totally divorced from the concerns of everyday Americans. Polling consistently finds that Americans on both sides of the aisle think Trump has handled the Epstein files poorly. Yet just 18% of registered voters are following the saga very closely. Another 30% are following it somewhat closely, but most aren't following it at all. Meanwhile, CNN's Harry Enden said in July that CNN polling found that the number of respondents who said that the Epstein case was their top issue was a grand total of 0. Interest in Epstein falls off a cliff when it's no longer dominating the headlines. I know this personally because for the last 6 months, I've been getting calls and text messages from regular folks across the country saying something along the lines of, wait, who is Jeffrey Epstein and why are all the podcasters talking about him? Exactly. Podcasters who make millions of dollars off of online content are obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein, but they are not the best arbiters of what actual voters care about. And making that mistake, allowing a small, economically secure elite to direct the agenda, is what led the Democrats to embrace preposterous ideas like open borders, transitioning children, and defunding the police. It's not just the alleged Epstein list that exposes this gap between content creators and voters. The people on the right defending bringing Nick Fuentes into the fold. Content creators. The people on the right who opposed President Trump taking out Iran's nuclear reactors. Content creators. The loudest quote-unquote MAGA voices do not always represent the MAGA voters, something the president is keenly aware of. Whether you can say the same thing about his successors, the jury is out. I spoke with Dave Rubin, an insightful commentator and a former lefty like me, about all of this and more. Here is some of that conversation. So Dave Rubin, thank you so much for joining me.
Batya, exclamation point. I'm very happy to finally be with you.
So let's start with just, do you agree with my analysis?
Yeah, I have to say it's sort of sad for me particularly because I was one of the first ones doing the online news thing. You know, I started my show back in 2015. I was at that time mostly doing long form interviews where now I do a daily news show plus some interviews. And the only reason I was doing it was because I felt that everything on cable news was making us dumber. And it was also at the advent of Snapchat and Vine videos and everything getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I saw what was happening to attention spans. There was a real starvation for long-form conversation, and that's when I got in, and Joe Rogan got in around the same time. And then over the last decade, obviously, online media exploded. It exploded and rose as mainstream media continued to descend over the last 10 years, largely at their own fault. I mean, it wasn't just a technological thing that changed here. You know, we're all walking around with the phone in our pocket, and we have access to our audiences, and they have access to us 24/7. But it was also that the mainstream media was completely negligent in its job. I mean, we could go through the laundry list of hoaxes and scams and conspiracy theories, whether it's Russia, 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 or the very fine people hoax, or all of the COVID lunacy. If you get the vax, you won't get nor transmit COVID. I mean, we could do this all day long. Jesse Smollett was lynched. So they failed miserably. And then at the same time, online media was rising, which was wonderful. But what you're addressing now is that in an online space where there are no rules, none of us sign up for any sort of course here or have to pledge to abide by any sort of journalistic integrity or anything else. I think what we're finding, particularly in the last 6 months or so, is that many of us who sit at a desk like you and I do, and we can have a bookshelf behind us or a nice jacket and look like journalists, it doesn't mean we are journalists. And I say that with all due irony. You know, interestingly, I'd never consider or call myself a journalist. I am a commentator. I tell people what I believe. I communicate the news. And sometimes I'm going to make mistakes. I have a pretty freaking good track record for a decade now. But I'm telling people my opinion. The difference is I'm admitting that. A lot of the people that you're sort of referencing in that intro there, they're purporting to be they're purporting to be newsmen or newscasters or journalists. And they simply aren't. Usually they're propagandists guised as journalists. And that really is the problem we're having now, because we're all going off into our corner. And at some point, how does a society work if quite literally your neighbor is just in a completely different information bubble than you are? You're going to be living on the same street next to each other, living in completely different worlds.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see how President Trump, I think, is really good at sort of looking through all this, probably because he's not very online in a way. He's, you know, tweets via, a friend or somebody who works for him. Yeah. Some of the politicians, though, are really falling for this. I think somebody who really seems to be in that camp is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she and President Trump had a big falling out this week, somewhat related to the Epstein files. President Trump called her Marjorie Taylor Greene and suggested that she was mad at him because he's not supporting her Senate bid. She suggested that this was only about Epstein. Here's her reference to Trump calling her a traitor.
Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me.
So is this fight now going to end because the Epstein files were released, or is there something deeper here brewing between MTG and the president? And where do you see this going?
Oh, it's much deeper than just the Epstein files. First off, what she said there was really disgusting, because her implication, since this is all about Trump, is that somehow he's serving foreign interests. I could do the half-hour laundry list of successes that Trump has had. Your audience is probably well aware of them, whether it is borders or deportation, or the trade deals that are working in our favor, or the 8 wars that came to a close, or getting DEI out of our institutions. I mean, we can go on and on about those things. The fact that they're having a political dispute, maybe he didn't want to endorse her for governor or senate or whatever that might be, and there is something related to the Epstein stuff here that's causing the friction there, but that she immediately goes to, okay, so he's somehow a traitor to the country. I mean, she knows that's not the case. You know, Donald Trump, for whatever his flaws may be, he has done the unthinkable. He fought the machine. He fought the deep state. He fought all of the media machine and everything that lied about him. He was almost assassinated. He did all that, almost impeached, basically lost his businesses in New York City, did all of that, and now is fighting for literally, Batya, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but you can go back and watch his videos when he was a huge star in the 80s, go on Phil Donahue or Oprah or any of these shows, and he's saying the exact same things he says now. He's a little more orange now. His affect is a little bit different. He's a little gruffer and a little older, but his principles are basically the same over the years. That does not mean he is right about everything, but to me, those of us that are broadly on the right, and you and I who come from the left are somewhat new. I still consider myself kind of new on this side of things. But anyone that is, I would say, if you are looking at this honestly, truly honestly, Donald Trump is doing as good a job as you possibly could. And not only that, look at the people around him, Marco Rubio and JD Vance and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Dr. Oz and Jay Bhattacharya. I mean, this is an all-star level cabinet that we're never going to get again. So I'm sorry, if you're on the right and this is not good enough for you, good luck. Good luck. And you know what? I have a feeling you'll find yourself on the left, which is exactly where Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker and the rest of these people are going to be, because that's the horseshoe theory of politics.
Right. So speaking of Tucker and the vice president, one of these other fights that's dividing, in my view, the content creators from conservatives is Tucker's cozy interview with white nationalist Nick Fuentes. A lot of Republicans, a lot of them came out and condemned Fuentes in no uncertain terms. One person who has not done that since this interview came out is the vice president, despite the fact that Fuentes has said just the most disgusting things about the vice president's own wife. I mean, you would think as a man, you want to stand up for your woman, right? I mean, what did you make of the fact that the vice president seems to be on the side of, well, this infighting is stupid, and he's also sort of taken up that view of, I have no enemies to my right, we're only fighting the left. What did you make of that?
Right. Well, first, Batya, I think it's worth noting, since I know how the internet works, that we should probably both acknowledge that Tucker has every right to interview whoever he wants. And I didn't hear anyone call for him to be deplatformed, meaning kicked off YouTube or Spotify or anything else. And I certainly would never call for that. However, as someone that talks for a living, and Tucker spends all day, every day criticizing people, that's what his job is, he was then getting criticized for his actions in that interview. It's as simple as that. Tucker name checks me constantly on the show. Okay, that's just fine. He has right to do that, and I can comment on him, et cetera, et cetera. So this had nothing to do with cancellation or deplatforming. As for JD Vance's position in all of this, you know, I sent out what I thought was an extremely thoughtful tweet to JD addressing what you said right there, in essence, that he should get ahead of this now, because while so much of it seems to be focused on the Jews, that really, guess what, buddy, they will go after Usha Vance. As you pointed out, Fuentes has done it, whether he's a white nationalist or a neo-Nazi or just a troll or a gay Mexican Zoomer. I don't know what he is exactly. I don't think it really cares, but I do think you're illustrating a more salient point, which is that this is now the nature of the internet. The crazier you are, what we seem to be doing is always grabbing the fringe and trying to drag it to the center. That's how social media works. So if you and I right now, we're having a fairly thoughtful conversation, you're welcome to challenge me on any of these ideas, of course, and you can come on my show and we can do the same thing. That will not go crazy viral, because we're going to explain ourselves. It's going to be thoughtful. We're not going to, you know, call people names to a certain extent, that sort of thing. However, if we did the crazy thing and said all of the crazy things and went with all the conspiracy theories and this, the Jews, this, and the blacks, that, and it would go viral. And then when someone looks and they go, boy, I got 50,000 tweets, 50,000 likes because I put this up and it's insane, you're going to start doing it again. And then the algorithm learns from that. So that gets to what you were talking about in the preamble there. And I would say for JD, I want my leaders to lead. It seems to me, and I'm a big supporter of him. I think he's been an incredible vice president. He was amazing at debate night, and subsequently, I think he's actually in sometimes a better explainer of Trump's ideas than he is. Trump's great at the slogan, and then JD really can knock out everything else. I'd like him to lead right now. Like, if you guys are afraid of these frog accounts on Twitter, then where is the leadership? And that was the question I posed to him, because they are going to come after your wife, even if she converts to Christianity. They don't like her because she's Indian, but they really don't like her because she's not Christian. So why not nip it in the bud right now? So that's for him to decide. I'd be happy to, I've had him on the show many times. I'd be happy to have him on again and discuss that.
It's so interesting because you and I are people of the left who really found a home here in this movement, because it seems so much to me to be, at least under Trump's guidance, very much guided by a desire to be in the kind of the middle, where most Americans are at, the common sense middle on so many issues. And so I was really taken aback when the people who think of themselves or portray themselves as the inheritors of this movement suddenly are treating white nationalists as if they're like Voldemort, like you cannot say their name, like you cannot say, like, actually, no, we're really proud of the fact that we got a lot of blacks here, we got a lot of Jews here, we got a lot of Latinos here, like we're not going to mess with that.
Well, the beauty of what Trump has done with MAGA is he created the most wide tent pro-America movement you possibly could, because it was never really about policy. It was about making America great again. So even though broadly everyone is sort of on the right, it started to welcome in all of these disaffected liberals. And by the way, it's not just you and I. It's Bobby Kennedy, who was running as a Democrat 2 years ago. It's Tulsi, who was running as a Democrat 4 years ago. It's Joe Rogan, who's a pot pot-smoking, mushroom-eating, MMA-fighting podcaster. It's a huge slew of people that have nothing to do with conservative politics per se, but love the country and can accept that you're going to live in a country with people who are different than you. So I have been so, if my career ended today, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that for the last 2 years, I fought to widen that tent as much as possible. And I know I did a little something in that. You know, Elon was retweeting me left and right before the election when I was talking about so many of these things, because he was just basically an old school liberal. But a liberal, you know, a conservative is just a liberal mugged by reality. So we all got mugged by crazy progressive reality. We're now part of this thing. And I would say it's up to Trump and JD to really figure out, okay, which is more important? Do you want sort of the radicals online who are, the point here is, Batya, that they're radically against Trump. I would ask anyone watching this, when's the last time you saw Tucker do anything that was pro-Trump or pro-MAGA or pro-America? He never does. On my show, I can talk about Trump's wins every day. So Trump will have to decide, do you want a wide tent that's going to welcome all of these people, or do you want this narrow, extremely loud online portion of people who are going to kick everybody else out? I think the answer is fairly obvious.
Is there anything you think the left still gets right more than the right?
No, there really is nothing. And I wish there was. I wish that was not true. You know, when I was leaving the left, you know, about 10 years ago, I kept saying it's not supposed to be this way. What I wanted was liberals to stand up for liberalism. And there's very few liberals on the left anymore. You know, liberalism, classical liberalism, of course, is based in individual rights and laissez-faire economics and logic and reason and mutual respect and things of that nature. And that has very little, if nothing, to do with the new intersectional socialist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, left. So it is nice to see that my friend Bill Maher, you know, still calls himself a liberal and is calling out his own side. And it's nice to see that John Fetterman is now the one sane guy in the party, but there really is nobody left. And that, again, it gets to my earlier point, because that's why anyone that's a moderate liberal, which is what most Americans are, they may not realize it, but most Americans are kind of live and let live. They're not crazed about the social issues, or at least they have their own personal beliefs, but they don't want to legislate other people's lives, which is even what Charlie Kirk himself, who was a very proud Christian, did not want to legislate other people's lives. That's how most Americans are. That has nothing to do with the modern Democratic Party. It has way more to do with the MAGA movement. But again, what comes post-MAGA, maybe it won't anymore, and then things will realign again. I mean, it's constant shuffling of the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, hopefully not sinking too fast.
So in looking towards 2028, who is your fantasy candidate for the Democrats to run? Would you rather they ran like the crazier version, or would they rather, who are you hoping they're going to run? Who do you think they're going to run?
Well, in that I don't want a Democrat to win, then it's better if they run the crazier version, I suppose, because the crazy is also a large, you know, people are going crazy about Mamdani, and I'm making all the jokes about him and all of those things. And I do think he's going to largely destroy New York City, a place where I spent my formative years, which is very upsetting, and where we had many family members over the decades who are literally all gone except for one cousin who I'm trying to get out one way or another. But anyway, I don't, you know, sometimes, you know the mind of someone that's born in New York. They think if you take them out of the 5 boroughs, they're going to spontaneously combust. But it's like, you know, it's sunny here in Florida. Come on, lady. Anyway, look, so they can run a crazy person, and that probably is just very narrow and everything else, and they probably don't win. My suspect is they're going to be smart enough to probably go with a Newsom type. Newsom, although I think he is, you know, basically the devil incarnate. You know, he comes off as a little more moderate, even though he's a radical himself. I mean, I don't think he has any principles. Everything goes to the radical left. But he doesn't, I don't think he fundamentally hates America and its founding like so many of the true progressives do. So I think they can import a lot of the bad ideas with his slick hair and, you know, well-fitting suits. And it probably makes more sense to go with him than sort of the outward, like America's fundamentally evil version of all of this.
And do you feel certain that the right is going to find its way on all of these issues that we discussed?
Well, I definitely don't feel certain, but I will say this. You know, when I was leaving the left 10 years ago, there were probably, you may remember this, there were probably about 10 of us publicly. It was called the intellectual dark web. There were about 10 of us that were liberals online. It was basically me and Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Gad Saad, Brett Weinstein, a few others. But we were all basically kind of lefties that were talking about what was wrong with the left. And we really thought we could do something to stop what we saw coming. And by the way, what we saw coming ultimately did happen, and we didn't stop it. The difference that I am seeing on the right now, as I'm seeing the right go crazy, is that I am seeing a much broader defense of decent American principles. I'm seeing a lot of people with a lot of political differences and religious differences and everything else stand up. I'm seeing politicians get involved and speak up against it. I also think conservatives generally have a better principle, a better set of principles, and it has a little something to do with the star that's on your neck, or in most people's cases, it has something to do with the cross. There is a belief system outside of just politics. Lefties generally have traded that in for pure secularism, so they go for whatever feels good at the moment. On the right, I'm seeing a much better pushback against this, and I think it's incumbent on us to just keep doing that. I don't need to be in a political party where everyone agrees with me, but I need to be in a political party where you can express yourself, where true American values are represented, and you're going to also understand that there's going to be some people who are different than you, and it's going to be okay. The other thing that we're fighting right now is incredibly narrow. It's wildly anti-American, and, you know, things burn hot for a while, and then they burn out. So I think we're going to be okay.
On that unbelievably positive and hopeful note, Dave Rubin, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Batya, I do all my black pilling on Mondays on the end of the week. That's where I do my white pilling, so I thought I could leave you that way. Shabbat shalom, my friend.
Shabbat shalom. Democrats have been decrying President Trump's mass deportation campaign for including folks who aren't criminals in its dragnet. This week, federal agents arrested 250 illegal migrants in Charlotte, North Carolina, but just 44 of them had criminal records. But here's the thing, President Trump didn't promise he would only deport the worst of the worst. He promised he would carry out the largest deportation program in American history. That's why he was elected. And it remains popular. Poll after poll after poll shows the majority of Americans support deporting every single illegal migrant. It's not because they're haters. Illegal migration drives down the wages in the industries migrants work in. And despite the common mythology, these aren't jobs Americans won't do. There isn't a single industry in America in which the share of workers who are illegal is larger than 27%. American citizens are doing all of those jobs. They're just being paid much less to do them. Joining me now, I could not be more honored to talk to Abraham Enriquez about this. He's the president of Bienvenido, which helps organize Hispanic voters around conservative values. Abraham, thank you so much for joining me. What am I getting wrong?
Well, look, great to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. This is a very, very important issue that I think we need to talk about leading up to the midterms. But I want to start with a little bit of perspective. Just a year ago, President Trump won the largest share of Hispanic voters for any Republican candidate. I was honored to play a pretty small role in that. But I can tell you this, that support has not vanished. It's there. And these polls that are coming out talking about Hispanic voters as they pertain to immigration, a lot of it is actually built on tiny Latino subsamples, right? Barely maybe even 100 people. You can actually flip a coin and get a little bit more reliable numbers on this issue. What you're not seeing right now is that this really almost has nothing to do with immigration. Look, to understand the Hispanic demographic, you have to understand two things. 2/3 of Hispanics on the voter rolls are now second and third generation American. What does that mean? We're assimilated to American culture better. A lot of us have a college degree. So yeah, immigration is an issue, but I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't even make the top 5 things that Hispanics care about. Every Hispanic voter is American, right? We care about the economy. That issue matters the most. Illegal immigration touches economy in the way that it burdens our Hispanic communities across this country more so than any other demographic. And I think that's why you see President Trump not losing any support really with the Hispanic voter base.
That's so interesting. So what you're saying is this mass hysteria that we saw after the Democrats won big a couple weeks ago in New Jersey and Virginia, to where Hispanic voters flipped for the Democrats, is not indicative of larger national trends that should be worrying the GOP?
Yeah, look, I think that when Democrats are trying to woke-splain, why President Trump or the Republican Party isn't doing things fast enough, I understand that many Hispanics on the ground in the communities that we talk to, they don't want to return to President Otto Penn's border chaos, right? With President Trump, we saw the lowest unemployment rate Hispanics have ever seen. We saw a secure border, but President Otto Penn's disaster on the federal level, it takes time to clean up some of that mess. So I think Hispanics, when it comes to that Tuesday election, it was more so of a vote of more of like state level issues that unfortunately had some effect on those governor races, especially we see in the New York City race. But I think that with Hispanics, we understand that it's better to lean on conservative leadership than Mamdani Moksha style leadership that we're ultimately going to destroy New York City. So I think we're going to see that leading up to the midterms as well.
And looking even further to 2028, who is catching your eye on the right as somebody who Hispanic voters might be likely to drift towards?
You know, a lot of Republican leadership, kind of that old guard, say, we can probably take a breath out after President Trump leaves the White House. I actually think it gets a little bit more tricky. We know that when President Trump's not on the ballot, Republicans don't do such a hot job of getting that coalition that he built. For that single mom in Detroit who felt like this party wasn't working for her, for the plumber and blue collar workers down in South Texas who felt like they were outcast of the Republican Party, President Trump brought them in and fought for them, right? So the next person that leads the America First message has to be able to get that message on the ground. I'm excited. Our tent is huge. We have a Marco Rubio. We have an Elise Stefanik. We have a JD Vance. I will say this to you. I spent a day campaigning with then Vice President candidate JD Vance in Mesa, Arizona, an area that is predominantly Hispanic, Spanish speaking. He won the hearts and minds of those voters. And I think it takes that kind of grassroots level of American pride to go out there and bring that coalition in. And well, I'm excited about it. So we'll see. I think it's a little too early to tell, but I'm just happy that our bench is full of A-star players.
The president is struggling right now in the polls in terms of this question of affordability, the cost of living, an extremely, extremely important issue for Hispanic voters. We see this in polling year after year. What could he be doing better to message, but also in terms of policy, to quell some of that discomfort and people just feeling that things are not going in the right direction?
I love this question. This question, I think, is even more important than some of the crazy things that leftist think tanks want to focus on immigration. The average age of Hispanic voters in America, I think, is about 29 years old. We're the youngest racial demographic in the country. Home ownership is incredibly important for us. Why? Because we know that the first step to generational wealth begins at home ownership. Democrats right now are talking about this idea that we should be for this communal living renter society. That is the first step to communism in this entire country when you don't own anything. What can President Trump be doing better? I think he's fighting day in and day out. I think the blame actually goes to Republicans in Congress who aren't fast enough to bring this America First agenda through the finish line. I think that's a big warning sign in the midterm elections with Hispanic voters if they see that at a party or that a Congress is not willing to fight with President Trump. The pivot, I think, goes back to the Congress more so than the president.
So what are you looking towards in 2026? Do you think that the Republicans should be worried about Hispanic voters?
We're talking about a demographic that in 2020, there was more Hispanic voters than Black voters, meaning for the first time ever, Hispanic voters were the second largest voting bloc in the country. There's a lot of pressure of the sense of, do we have to have Hispanic candidates at the top of the ticket? Not necessarily. I think that what's really exciting are, a Rick Scott, when he ran for Senate, he invested in that Spanish media to bring in that coalition. Senator Ted Cruz, who invested in that Spanish media when he was running for re-election in Texas. I'm excited to see how some of these candidates in the Republican field embrace Hispanic voters that are coming into the party. I think, every 32nd a Hispanic turns 18. These are people who are going to go to the voting booths. They care about things like economic opportunity, home ownership. So if you harp too much on immigration in a way that is soft on border security and deportations, you're going to lose that voter block. So that's what I'm excited about, to see how this conversation that President Trump started in his presidential election will continue on the level of congressional midterm campaigning.
Abraham, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Up next, the Democrats' video telling troops to defy orders and the president's response. Our panel will debate. A group of Democratic lawmakers who served in the military or as intelligence officers put out a disturbing video this week encouraging our armed service members to refuse orders from the Trump administration.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk. This administration is pitting our uniformed military
And intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath.
To protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
But from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
you must refuse illegal orders.
I'm sorry, this video is appalling. How exactly is the administration pitting our military against American citizens? How has it threatened the Constitution? The administration has abided by every single court order, including patently ridiculous ones that were immediately overturned by higher courts. They are suggesting the military disobey orders from the executive branch, and they call Trump an insurrectionist? Noting the irony, President Trump responded on Truth Social, posting seditious behavior punishable by death. Those defending the video argue that it's simply stating a fact. Members of the military should refuse illegal orders. But the subtext of the video is obvious. Trump is not a legitimate president, and his orders should be treated as suspect by our men and women in uniform. Here to discuss is Kaivan Shroff, Democratic commentator and former Clinton campaign digital organizer, and Rob Smith, an Army veteran and senior fellow at the Rainey Center for Public Policy. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here. Rob, you served our country.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your service. What was your reaction to the video and then to the president's reaction?
Well, first of all, the video was so outrageous, I had to double check to make sure it wasn't AI. I mean, I seriously, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because what you have are elected Democrat officials basically telling armed service members that it is their duty to disregard the orders of the president and the orders of the National Guard and all that stuff. And so it is this intentional subversion of what is supposed to be happening. And so when I went to D.C., and, I'll go back and forth to D.C. a while, and, the National Guard is deployed to D.C., it is a safer, cleaner place than I've experienced D.C. to be for a very long time. And so it's almost as if Democrats don't want our cities to be safe. They don't want our citizens to be safe, and they want these cities to be just, the crap holes that they've been for the past couple decades.
I'm a little confused, though, because you say that they're saying to ignore a Trump order. What Trump order did you see in that video that they said not to follow?
Well,
they reminded folks to follow the Constitution, and I think there's that saying, a hit dog hollers, right? If somebody screams, hey, ugly in a bar, and you turn, maybe you're ugly, right? So Trump knows he's been giving these questionable orders. By the way, I don't understand.
What? Can you give an example of a questionable
Well, there's
order?
disputes, right, over his ordering National Guard into cities. Federal courts have repeatedly ruled
And
that's
you know
unlawful.
what? It's so funny when you say
and then
that.
bombing these vessels, right, which Republican Senator Rand Paul has said is extrajudicial killing. So things like that. And of course, by the way, I want to clarify, there is a standard that rank and file troops know, and I know you know this, of is it something so outrageous? Is it manifestly unlawful? Is it an order to kill somebody, a citizen, for example, or to torture somebody? They know to ignore that stuff and not to follow those orders. So why not remind people of that?
That's completely ridiculous, first of all. And when you talk about these, well, number one, it's completely ridiculous because they're intentionally trying to muddy the waters, and you know this stuff. This is the way that they use social media. But I want to make a point that when you talk about all of these orders that the federal judges have knocked down, if you really get into who some of these federal judges are, it is completely ridiculous. Some of these people have never
So
served
it's
as
not
a
the
judge
law.
before.
If you disagree with it,
It's not about me not disagreeing with it. And first of all, we have seen it go all the way up to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court rule in favor of the Trump administration. We have seen this literally 3 times over the past couple of months.
These are disputed issues
what we're
of
doing
law.
these are disputed issues because
and by the way,
creating
if you wonder,
something
if you wonder why
Ivan, have you seen the Trump administration
violate the law repeatedly?
Ignore a court order?
Yes,
Which
and
one?
we know that Emil Bove,
Which one?
specifically, right, somebody that Trump has elevated, said F the courts. Everybody knows that happened.
Which court order
they
did
have
the
the
Trump
intention to
administration-
violate these laws.
Which one did they
Repeatedly, we
violate?
know that ICE is violating court orders all the time. Specifically, we do. Anyone can Google.
Who
they
is
specifically
we and
said, for
anyone
example,
can Google?
you can't use tear gas. Look it up. Look in Chicago. In Chicago, they are repeatedly violating the restrictions courts have placed on them. But I will add, right, Donald Trump knows. You want to read into the subtext of this video, and yet Donald Trump calls for the execution of sitting elected officials who are veterans as well. And we all want to pretend we don't know what he means by that and then say, oh, he wasn't saying he wants to execute them. He's retweeting tweets by neo-Nazi accounts saying to hang these people.
Which neo-Nazi accounts?
Go look at what the president's retweeted.
No, I
It's been
mean,
covered.
you're
Did
going to
I remember some random username?
You're going to tell
But let
me,
also
if
tell
you're going to
let me also tell you.
If you're going to tell me that the president of the United States is retweeting neo-Nazi accounts,
look it up.
You need to tell me exactly what neo-Nazi account it is right now at this moment.
Sorry,
nope,
this is you don't understand.
Nope,
Just because I don't remember user 10555.
I want to get in here. I want to get in here.
That the president of the United States is retweeting neo-Nazis.
Look it up. Google it. I want you to know this guy is a liar. Google it.
I want to get in here.
Good. You're going to be fact-checked.
Ivan, I think that the president should not have posted that to Truth Social.
So,
but I think that this video, the purpose of it was a troll. It was to get people to feel that service members are being asked to question his orders, which is treasonous.
Let me tell you, it's not treasonous.
Can't they both be wrong?
Yes. And let me stop talking for 5
finish.
seconds. So the military, right? Pete Hegseth has fired senior attorneys who would usually be part of advising and making these decisions and communicating, right? They no longer brief these elected officials. They just do these things that are illegal or questionable at least, and they don't bring lawyers with them anymore. So that's all why part of this problem is created. So yes, both sides can be wrong. I will say, I'm not a fan of this video as a Democrat this week because we should be talking about the Epstein files, and it was a sloppy, choppy video that now we're talking about this, and that's an unforced error, 100%. But I do want to just say, these lawmakers, these veterans are now getting death threats because of Donald Trump. And I want to use Marjorie Taylor Greene as an example, because just weeks ago, people like me were being silenced by people like you saying we're not allowed to use English words like authoritarianism, like fascism, because they promote violence. We now have the president calling for, let me finish, calling for death. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been in office for years. She's been criticized from everyone from AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Joe Biden, Liz Cheney, across the spectrum. She doesn't get a bomb threat after that. The minute Donald Trump and his fans go after her, she's got a bomb threat. She's got to think about security.
I'm just curious
Wait, Rob, I want you to answer a specific question that I have.
He's in his own world.
Which is,
I'm in the world where I'm trying to figure out what neo-Nazi
Answer her question. She just told you.
All right. My question to you is,
you're in the middle.
We're very close.
My question to you is, what should the right's response to that be? Because the right was very exercised about, calling people Nazis, calling people fascists for a long time. When the president does tweet something like that, I mean, to me, I read that as him pointing out the irony that they called him an insurrectionist, but I could understand why people feel that is threatening to their lives. So what would you say to that?
I mean, well, number one, I don't think the post was a great idea, first of all. But I get, again, when you have Democrat officials that are making a social media video that are basically telling people that are serving in the United States military right now to ignore the orders that are coming in from the executive branch of this country, it is a problem.
That's not what they said.
It is an issue.
Unlawful orders.
Wait, hold on. So despite all of the fighting we're having here, we all actually agree that we don't like the president's Truth Social and we don't like the video.
I agree that I don't love it.
The first tried to deny it.
I agree that I don't love it. I agree that I don't love it.
Is
that like the lie that you said about Trump retweeting neo-Nazis who you can't?
It's not. We're acknowledging those posts happened.
You can't tell me who these accounts are.
I didn't memorize
tell me
random
who these alleged neo-Nazis are.
Anyone's going to be able to Google it after this segment.
Can I
I'm going to post it on social media and they're going to be
guys.
And the issue is there. This is the issue right now. is that we have literally gone through the past 10 years of everybody that does not toe the leftist Democrat line is a neo-Nazi, is a fascist, is an authoritarian, all that stuff. It is lies.
They're literally non-designating the swastika a hate symbol at the Coast Guard.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to call it because I can't hear what anything you're saying, and I don't think the audience can either. Ivan Schropp and Rob Smith, thank you both so much for being here and for finding common ground despite it all. Michelle Obama says that she is not running for the White House, and you'll never guess why. Coming up next. Welcome back to the show. Friends, we've let Michelle Obama down again. The former First Lady has a habit of expressing her immense and exhausting disappointment in her husband, in men in general, and in the country that elected her husband president twice. Speaking at the Brooklyn Academy of Music this week, Michelle told people to stop asking her to run for president. This damn country just isn't ready for her. This is why the Democrats are so lost. It's run by people like the Obamas who are worth an estimated $70 million, who think the country has failed them. With us now, host of the Just Kira Davis podcast, a brilliant friend, Kira Davis. Thank you so much for being here. What was your reaction to this video?
You know what? I have been watching Michelle do her Poor Woe Is Me tour, her book tour, her podcast tour, whatever it is, for the last 6 months. And I got to tell you, as a Black woman, as a Black mother, I can't think of anybody more disappointing to and for the Black community. This is the first Black First Lady of the United States. That position comes with a social cachet and an influence that most leaders in this world could only dream of. The Obamas could be doing anything right now. You know what I mean? They could be doing anything. They could be solving world hunger. They could be talking about race relations if they want to do. I mean, we're all tired of it, but at least that's the thing. What is Michelle Obama choosing to do with her social cachet? She's on a complaining tour. She's complaining about hair. She's complaining about their awful female candidates that the Democrats keep forcing down our throats. Have you ever heard either of the Obamas come forward and say, hey kids, hey Black kids, I came from nothing. This is how I did it. Here are the steps I took. Here's how you can do it too. Michelle Obama is not speaking to other girls going, I became the first Black First Lady and you can do something similar. Here's how I did it. She's only talking about herself and how hard it was for her and what things are like for her. These are complete narcissists. Michelle Obama is the most disappointing First Lady and Black woman I have ever seen in my life.
It's so true. I remember when I first started listening to her podcast, she and her brother grew up pretty poor, you know, like on the lower end of working class. Their parents worked really hard, but they had nothing. Both of them have achieved a lot in their lives. And yet they sit there on the podcast and talk about how racist and sexist the country is. And I remember the first time I heard it, I thought, I want the podcast with their parents. How did their parents create such successful children who came from so little? It was like the wrong Obamas were making the podcast.
Right. It's ridiculous. There's supposed to be this inspiring story. Barack Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize just for getting elected, just for being a Black guy who got elected. You know what I mean? Like they have all of this social cachet. How dare Obama come in the last days of the 2024 election and lecture Black men about who they should be voting for or who they should be following? And the Obamas, the most powerful Black people in the world, have done nothing, absolutely zero for the American Black community. The South Side of Chicago, instead of that monstrosity of a library, the whole problem on the South Side could be solved with the Obama's $70 million fortune. They don't care. These people are complete narcissists, and they had the veil of diplomacy when they were in power, when they were in office. And we were still under that spell of diplomacy. But all that's been burned away, and we get to see who they really are. And you know what? They're just a couple of disappointing narcissists.
Very well said, Kira. Speaking about disappointing narcissists, let's look at the 2028 slate on the Democratic side. We've got Newsom, AOC, and Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg. You live in California. What should we know about these people that we might not already know?
They're all utter and complete failures. And if any one of them are elected to the highest office in the land, America is screwed. No, I think what we have to look at that field so far, it's early, it's 2025, but if that's the field we're going to get, the Democrats have nothing to offer. Those people have nothing new to offer. AOC's offering socialism, which is going to be a big battle, but that's not going to win a presidential election. Pete Buttigieg, I love how Trump describes him, just that nice guy who rides his bike with his husband on the back of the bike. It's really loving. Is he going to win president of the United States? And what the is Kamala doing? What is she doing out there? Who is she talking to? Who is her audience? Everybody hates her. The left hates her for losing the White House. The right hates her for her word salads and just being a complete empty suit. What is she doing? What are any of these people doing? The only person I think who's really serious here is Gavin Newsom. And that's because he's been running for president for 8 years. And he's definitely not going to be giving up. So I do want to say this while I have the bully pulpit here. Don't make fun of us here in California. I know a lot of y'all out there like to insult us and say you get what you vote for and leave you guys to your own devices. You're going to get what you deserve. But here's the thing. We're the last line of defense between you and a guy like Gavin Newsom. We know all of his secrets. We know all of the things that he's been doing over the years. We've been his best friend for 12 years now. So you better hope people like me stay here in California and fight. That guy is the problem. He's the one to watch.
I mean, how do people in California see Gavin Newsom?
Nobody likes him here. He has his true blue base. Of course, you're never going to peel those people off, but he is extremely unpopular. Most people don't, I really believe this. I'm not even trying to be silly here. I think most people don't even realize he's the governor of California. He's spent the last week in Brazil at a climate change conference.
Amazing.
Pacific Palisades home are still
ridiculous.
Burned brown.
Kira Davis, come back very, very soon.
Absolutely.
I smell a complete viewer favorite. Thank you. Coming up, why I'm rooting for New York City's next mayor, Zoran Mamdani. We began with what we learned about America this week, and we end with what we're looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to the buddy comedy I didn't know I needed. Jess and Zoe take New York. New York Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani announced this week that he would be keeping on our great police commissioner, Jessica Tisch. Known for her work bringing down crime and cracking down on corruption in the city, Tisch has really done an amazing job making the city safe. She's the perfect foil for Mamdani's equivocal support for the NYPD and the unfortunate DSA-inspired defund the racist police posts of his past. Throughout the campaign, when Mamdani's name came up with concerned neighbors or in synagogue or with my family and friends, I always said the same thing. He can't impose his socialist agenda without Albany. His views on the Middle East are irrelevant. The one thing he can do is replace the police commissioner with someone who doesn't support our cops and doesn't take crime seriously. As long as he keeps Commish Tisch, we'll be okay. Keeping on Tisch shows a maturing Mamdani who actually wants to succeed, starting with reassuring New Yorkers that their safety is not going to be a casualty of his reign. I am praying that he succeeds. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It was an honor to have you with us. May God bless and protect you and the United States of America.